We will hear from a number of people who have been involved in this work in various ways and in mahi for the Commission. Just before we get started, I just want to acknowledge that this discussion will include sensitive issues, and so if you do need support, please reach out for that. For example, from Outline Aotearoa or the Need to Talk service on 1737. Cameras and microphones are set as off for the audience, and the discussion is being recorded for sharing later. You can ask questions in the chat, and a section with questions from the audience will be asked at the end. We will have time for that. The Insights report being referred to is available on the Commission website with our other resources on conversion practices. On the call, on the webinar today, we have New Zealand Sign Language interpreters, so we may need to pause sometimes for those to change, and that will flip between two different interpreters. We also have our live captioner, Catherine, so you can turn on captions from clicking on the three dots in the bottom right corner. I'll just give a moment for anybody who needs to do that. So before we get started, and we hear from the people who have been in this work and have particular roles at the Commission, I just wanted to make reference really to, because of my statutory role being the Disability Rights Commissioner, I just wanted to pull some things out of the reports that I thought were really relevant to disabled people who are also rainbow people. So the Royal Commission of Inquiry into State Care, as we noted in our report in the section on disabled rainbow people, highlighted that found that homophobic and transphobic abuse took place at Lake Alice, and has had a profound and enduring impact on those harmed. The intersection between being disabled and being rainbow and having a religious or cultural identity, the report acknowledges, warrants further exploration in the context of conversion practices. And there is some work being done around that, but I just wanted to make that acknowledgement, in particular in relation to my portfolios. So, first of all, we are going to introduce the panel, and so I will go to Matt first. Matt had a key role in this work and worked for the Commission at the time. So I'll hand it over to you, Matt, to introduce yourself more fully, but welcome to the discussion.
Thank you, Prudence. Kia ora koutou, ko Matt Langworthy, toka wingoa. I'm a former employee of the Commission. I had the privilege of managing the team that implemented this conversion practices ban and wrote this report we're here to talk about today. I'm a survivor of over 20 years of conversion practices myself, and it's really great to see so many people here today. Thank you for joining us.
Kia ora. Thanks, Matt. Next, we have Langi, who has been involved in this work and also continues to be involved in the area of conversion practices through their role with Outline. Langi, over to you.
Nisambula Vinaka, my name's Langi. My ancestors come from Fiji and Tonga as well as the UK. We come from the island of Benga and Yangeta in Fiji. So I'm a disabled person myself with lived experience of PTSD and neurodivergency. And I'm a survivor of conversion practices. At Outline, I'm the peer support manager. So I manage the Conversion Practices Survivor Network and co-facilitate our peer support group for survivors of conversion practices. It's really good to be here today.
Kia ora Langi, welcome. Next we have Julia Whaipooti, who is our tēnā rangatira leader at Te Kāhui Tika Tangata, and so has a critical role in leading the commission as part of our team. Kia ora Julia, welcome, great to have you here. Over to you to introduce yourself.
Thank you, Prudence. Tēnā koutou katoa, ko Julia Whaipooti taku ingoa, ko tēnei taku ingoa rota, nā reira tēnā, no Ngāti Parau ahau, tēnā koutou katoa. My name is Julia. I have the privilege and responsibility of working with the team here at Te Kāhui Tika Tangata. Firstly, I'd like to acknowledge all the survivors involved in this work for the generosity of sharing expertise you never should have had. I also would like to acknowledge many of the survivors who have not engaged, and understandably so, that exist in our whānau and our communities, and that for our role it brings into sharp focus the need and responsibility of all of us to ensure that there are no more survivors of this abuse that we know is continuing today. I also want to acknowledge I was not here at the time of this report. I was working at the Royal Commission into Abuse and Care, and so the many survivors of Rainbow and Takatapuhi community, of which this is part of the abuse that has happened by state to many of our people. I identify as Takatapuhi, and I do so politically. I do so in the sense that Takatapuhi is not a term that existed before colonisation, and its meaning pre-colonisation referred to a close, intimate partner, and that it has been reclaimed for all Māori within the Rainbow community to have a sense of belonging in response to the harm that happens to all our whānau, Māori and non-Māori in the Rainbow community. So I take that, the term I had that was pre-colonial and which some of you may know Papa Moana Jackson used, was mokopuna, because we are all of the same whānau. We are not of differences to be diminished. So I just wanted to open with that and to state firmly I'm not a survivor of these practices, but as all of us are, I'm responsible for ensuring that we are part of the community to stop this from happening ever again. So nā reira, tēnā koutou, and a privilege to sit alongside the panel with you both, Matt and Langi, and thank you, Prudence. Back to you.
Kia ora, thank you for that, Julia, and it's great to have the three of you on our panel today, and in particular Langi and Matt, acknowledging your lived experience in this area. We're going to start off, and Matt's going to tell us a little bit about the Commission's role and what led to this work. So Matt, what was the Commission's role with the banning of conversion practices legislation?
Thank you, Prudence. The Commission was asked to implement the ban. So after many years of advocacy, and I know some of you online today will have played key roles in that, the Conversion Practices Prohibition Legislation Act came into force in 2022, and it created new criminal offences relating to conversion practices and amended the Human Rights Act so that conversion practices are a form of discrimination that fall under the Commission's powers. A conversion practice
No, to continue, sorry.
I just wanted to add one more piece to that, and that is that a conversion practice, just so we're all on the same page, is any practice that attempts to change a rainbow person's gender identity, their gender expression, or their sexual orientation.
Thanks for that, Matt. And so what did the legislation direct us to do?
So the Commission has a number of core roles that now apply to conversion practices. So that's things like to inform, to receive complaints, to provide dispute resolution service, to refer complaints to the Human Rights Review Tribunal. And we had to stand up all those functions anew for conversion practices. We also were charged with undertaking education and prevention work to support this new law.
Yeah, so that's both a really big thing and a not something that we would wish to need to do, of course, but also really great that it did come in. So what did the Commission do?
Andre Afamasanga, who many of you will know and is on this call today, and we pulled together a team of people. There was time-limited funding provided to the Commission, and this was a diverse group of people, most of whom were also survivors of conversion practices. And we had to design and launch the complaint service. We worked alongside the Rainbow and other sector colleagues to prepare people for this to go live. We developed and wrote guidelines to help people understand the legislation for those working with youth, for mental health professionals, for medical healthcare professionals, for people working in religious communities, and you can find those on the Commission's website. We commissioned research, now peer-reviewed and published, called Developing a Holistic Response to Spiritual Abuse, looking at how survivors need to be supported. We responded to public queries. We raised awareness through media and social media content and speaking at conferences and reaching out to a range of groups, including visiting faith communities. That we filmed survivor stories and we funded the setup of the Outline Conversion Practices Survivor Network. And of course, we wrote the report that we're here to launch today.
So, speaking about the report, how did the Insights report come to be and what is it?
I think one of the things that I want to say about this is it came to be because we felt really early on a great sense of responsibility to capture what we were hearing from survivors. So right from the beginning, Andre and I and the team wanted this work to be informed by survivors, all the parts of the work that we were doing. And so we started with several survivor hui, including dedicated hui for Māori, Pacific, and ethnic survivors. And throughout the 20 months that we worked together, we kept engaging with survivors. And we realized early on that we were amassing probably the largest collection of insights into conversion practices in Aotearoa that had ever existed. And we needed to document that. And so the report came out of that obligation we felt, that desire we felt to document. And one thing that was really consistent among survivors is a lot of clarity on what should be happening next. And so a key part of the report became the recommendations. We also spent some time going through select committee submissions because there were many valuable stories and recommendations there as well. So all of that came together to form this report. And I think one of the things that we wished we could have done more is we really need greater understanding of the experience of conversion practices that disabled people and Māori and Pacific and ethnic community people and transgender and non-binary people experience. And so we have tried our best in this report to highlight those experiences, but I think you'll see that in every case, we really call for more research to be done in those areas particular. I think if I could add one more thing, I would say that it's not just an example of best practice to incorporate lived experience voices in this way. This is also, this report and our whole program was an act of restoration. The experience of being subjected to conversion practices is an experience of losing your voice. And that's through, in religious settings, the level of indoctrination and coercion and abuse that exists. For transgender and non-binary people, it's being discouraged or restricted from accessing the healthcare that you need, or facing ignorance, or having healthcare that's inappropriate forced on you. Those are all experiences of having your voice muted and taken away from you. And so our approach, our hope is that releasing this report and all the other resources that survivors helped us write, that it goes at least a little way to restoring that lost voice. And this report, this labor of love, it's also today a cohort to all of you who are here with us, who shared your stories, and an acknowledgement of your courage. And it's an encouragement as well to people who are still experiencing conversion practices or who haven't spoken up, to reach out either to any of us or to Outline or to some safe and friendly space to get some support and make connections with people who understand what you've gone through.
Yeah, thanks, Matt. That's really important. I know that you left your role with the Commission not too long after I started, but fortunately I had been able to witness some of the work of the Conversion Practices team before coming into this role, and I know for the individuals I know who participated in that work, it really was important to give them voice in a safe space to be sharing some of their experiences. We're going to take a bit of a look at the recommendations, and Julia is going to talk to us about those. And so, as Matt mentioned, many of the recommendations are from survivors themselves, from select committee recommendations, and from the Commission's own engagement. Julia, what are some of the key recommendations in the Insight report for supporting survivors of conversion practices in various settings?
Kia ora, Prudence, and kia ora, Matt. And just to reaffirm the expertise of survivors in developing the report and the recommendations, so that the strength and mana that exists within that. As I said at the start, it's the change, that the introduction of legislation, but the responsibility of change rests on all of us across parts of society. So the recommendations take a real wide approach in terms of recommendations for the government, for media, for religious and faith communities, and speaks also directly to survivors and the rainbow communities, identifying where there's been large groups that have been disproportionately affected by conversion practices, including our Māori and Pacific reports. The recommendations also focus on work with children and young people, those who work with children and young people, and the combination of recommendations are quite targeted in the sense that it recognises we all have a part in society to change the presence of conversion practices in our community. So whilst the law has changed, that the practice still remains harmful to our communities and societies until we all play a part within that. Some of the recommendations targeted towards government focus around the strengthening of the legislation and to make sure that resourcing and funding is given to support the intent of the legislation. But if I may hone in around the recommendations to Māori survivors, because in the recommendations around that, I think underpins and plays a role in the sense of belonging for all people, the rainbow community. And so part of that is being firm and knowing that conversion practices stem from colonization, and that's not something that's past, it is present, and that the recommendations to Māori is that we engage with pre-colonial understandings of sexuality and gender and create opportunities to wānanga around that. And I don't think that is specific to Māori. The benefits of that and understanding is for the benefits of all whānau in the rainbow community, and that homophobia, transphobia, the the practices that cause harm to rainbow communities stem from colonisation. They stem from an understanding of colonisation. In Māori, and one of the recommendations around supporting Māori cultural revitalisation or bringing back into the light that understanding, because we know that's not commonly practiced. I can speak for myself personally as a Takatapui woman who is well supported within my whānau construct. This should not have been an exception, but I didn't need to come out within my whānau, to my whānau as gay or Takatapui, because that was understood that we are not differences or deficits to be solved. We come as part of a community. And so we come as part of a whānau and we have strengths to add, and that is steeped within our language. If we think about our gender neutral language, for example, ia, we have gender, there are gender roles within our culture, but ia is gender neutral. It can apply to anyone. Or the kupu around, I draw on this Prudence, like takiwātanga, which is the kupu Māori for autism, is really, that word is around in one's own time. So our language is beautiful and it is inclusive. And at the heart of that is whakapapa, which whaka is to build on papa tōnuku, the layers and generations, that we are all something that we build and come from each other and come from a place of belonging. It takes something quite exceptional to be exclusive, to exclude communities and people. So the root of these harmful phobias, homophobia, transphobia, they do not exist in our pre-colonial stories, in our atua stories. So I wanted to hone in on that, on those recommendations around for tangata whenua, or who are takatapui, to engage with our mātauranga and pre-colonial knowledge, because at the heart of this, and this speaks to the recommendation to all of our rainbow community, is that the recognition and the significant the right for us all to belong and to be in the rainbow community, that has underpinnings on this land in pre-colonial times, and I think that's the end point of where we should be heading. And I probably just have, I'm taking my time, one pre-colonial times story of our atua that speaks of the story of gender fluidity. Some of you will know Whakatane as a town, but the word, the kupu, in its true sense, it comes from, it means to act as a man. And back in the day, way back in the day, so 12th century, there was a tipuna called Wairaka, a young wahine Māori, and all the men had gone to shore, so there was only wahine left where they were when they saw a canoe drifting away. And at that time, it was tapu for wahines to take paddles. So what she did is she went and got the canoe, she got the paddle, and she took it, and then the words she used were kia whakatane au ia ho. I will act, draw on the power of man. And what that just shows, I think, and if we translate that to today, it just shows that gender is fluid. It is fluid, and identity is fluid, but it is a strength and not something to be ashamed or hidden from. So I wanted to bring that into the light, because that is also my area, I suppose, of strength to speak to, but to recognise that there are a number of the combination of recommendations here targeted at government in terms of how they categorise conversion practices, to religious and faith communities who have the power and state structures that still enable abuse to occur in this way, for conversion practices to occur. So the focus on that to affirm the rights of rainbow people, and to create plans, because it will not disappear just by an acknowledgement of the report. It requires action. And so the combination of all of these recommendations do prescribe specific actions to different groups, to our communities, Māoris I've spoken to Pacific and ethnic communities as well, as engaging with customary knowledge, and of course to health professionals who have a role in this. So all the elements of people in society who have power to stop and can enable conversion practices to continue, that this is really an attempt to make sure changes, not just legally in legislation, but societally and in the heartbeat of all of our communities and within all of our whānau. I'll stop there, Prudence, unless you have more questions you want to focus in on.
Kia ora, Julia. Thank you for that. I think that that's really good grounding for this kaupapa in Aotearoa. And I hadn't heard that story before, actually, about whakatāne. So I really like that. We're going to go to Langi, who is... Oh, I have a question for Langi. Langi, I'll just make sure that you are on screen. You are now. Thank you. How can we ensure that support services for survivors of conversion practices are inclusive, accessible, and culturally sensitive?
Thank you. I think the first point just needs to be that we really need things to be survivor-led. It's like my experiences in the peer support area and having people doing the support who have lived experience of conversion practices is so important and really an essential part of people's healing. The other thing is just the importance of lived experience and lived experience across culture and disability and experience of conversion practices. The disabled community says nothing about us without us, and that's what we need to use in services for conversion practices as well. When it comes to accessibility, it's really about asking disabled people what they need. What are the barriers that would stop people from being able to access the service? Needing NZSL interpreters, needing information and documents in different formats. And the other thing with that is just the importance of having a trauma-informed way of working because people have significant trauma as survivors. Just to jump to being culturally sensitive, I think that it's so important that services have a strong commitment to te and to active decolonisation, and that the people work with an actual decolonial praxis in the way that they work with survivors. So one of the things that was interesting for me in the Insights report was the part about intersectionality and how survivors had these distressing or uncomfortable experiences within rainbow organisations because there wasn't the understanding of their culture or their familial background, and people would often feel torn or conflicted by the advice they were being given. So I think that in order to really provide support, it's like being able to really come alongside people and really deeply understand their background and be able to talk to them about that. What else? I think the other thing I want to turn to is that there's just so many different types of conversion practices. You've got religious ones, non-religious ones, clinical ones. You've got online kind of radical feminist ideological conversion practices. And so I do think that the differences need to be quite deeply understood. Often the effects are quite can be similar in terms of people ending up with like deeply internalized hatred towards themselves. But yeah, it's like, yeah, there's just such diversity. And in terms of like, even say within Christian conversion practices space, there's such a different range of experiences. It's something that matters to me because I'm a survivor of different types of conversion practices, and at different times in my life. And so, it's just something that I try to really keep in mind. I also want to add with this that conversion practices for trans people can be denying access to gender-affirming healthcare. And so conversion practices for trans people can look very different from conversion practices for cis people. On that point of gender-affirming healthcare, I do really want to talk to, currently at the moment, we are facing the risk that the government will be trying to limit access to puberty blockers for trans children. And I just want to say unequivocally that that is a conversion practice. It is for ideological reasons, and it is an attempt to suppress the identity of those children. So, sorry, I'm becoming quite emotional talking about this, but I think what I want to say about it is, I guess, just this, that we all need to act together to fight this, and I think the other thing is that services really need to be able to be responsive to these type of issues. Like, coming from Outline, I'm really kind of going, what can I do to actually help the children and whānau that will be affected by this? But actually our services are really stretched, and yet we need to be able to be very creative and agile in our approach. And so it's that kind of needing enough funding and resources as organisations to be able to provide the appropriate support. I hope I've answered the question. I think I should stop talking.
I mean, there's plenty in there, Langi, but I have another question for you, but just wanted to acknowledge a couple of things in there. First of all, you can see the Commission's submission on puberty blockers on our website. We have released that publicly for more about the human rights considerations that we've advised on. And next, I just wanted to pick up on sort of the intersectionality you spoke of, and again, we talked of disabled people and Māori and Pacifica and ethnic identities and religious and cultural contexts, and of course that adds so many layers to people's experiences. And I did just want to clarify for anybody who's not aware, it's not just that my role is the Disability Rights Commissioner, and I have also the Rainbow Rights portfolio, but actually there is a much higher percentage of disabled people amongst rainbow people, or vice versa, and so this is really important to look at these intersectionalities, and sorry, that's a higher percentage than the general population at the intersection of disabled and rainbow people. So Langi, what role can survivor-led advocacy play in promoting justice and accountability for survivors of conversion practices?
Well, I think survivor-led advocacy has played a really huge role I think we have to acknowledge everything that's happened with the legislation. Everything's come about because of survivor voices. So I do want to just really acknowledge that. And I want to, I guess, encourage people who are survivors themselves into that it is really essential. And I think for me, advocacy has also been a part of my healing. And for survivors, it's like that we really want to see the world different than what we experienced. And so often we're quite motivated to try and make that change. I do want to say that kind of it's okay to take time for yourself and just heal and focus on your healing as well. Like there is a tension sometimes, or a difficult balance between the work that you're doing, speaking out, and the work that you're doing, trying to heal. And so it's like, I do want to say that both are important, and that sometimes it will just be that you're having to focus on healing, and that's okay. Like we're a community, and other people take up the mantle at different times. So yeah, I guess I don't want the burden of advocacy to kind of land too heavily on people. But yeah, the different, I think advocacy can have an effect in so many different ways. It's about informing the policy and legislation, changing the systemic injustices, building community and solidarity. I think there's no limit to the way that to the role that survivors can play, really.
Thank you, Langi. I think that's really important that you talk about that it's okay, not to have capacity for that all the time, or to take time for yourself in your own journey. I think in these experiences where people have, such personal experience and often a lot of trauma associated with that, in other spaces as well, but that can be, we need to look after ourselves in doing that, and make that a real priority, as well as using our experiences to be able to advocate so that these things don't happen to other people. Matt, Julia touched on earlier, it's not just about publishing a report, that actually action needs to happen. So what are the potential future directions for research, policy and practice in supporting survivors of conversion practices?
Yeah, thank you. I would go back to a comment I made earlier. We need more understanding of conversion practices, experiences, particularly those experienced by transgender and non-binary and disabled people and Māori, Pacific and ethnic communities. The more we can understand about the broad range of conversion practices that exist in so many settings and communities, the more we can strengthen policy. So that's a really important first step. I would also like to see more research looking at the long-term effects of conversion practices on people. We know some of the abuse that happens and the coercion and the blocking access to care. And we understand some of the immediate after effects of that better now than we used to. But apart from our own experiences and anecdotes we collect from each other in the survivor community, there isn't great understanding in the literature of the long-term impacts, and we know they are many and significant. In terms of policy, I've often been, while very grateful for the act, a little bit critical that it seemed to come out and then be left to survivors, the burden. You've got to go and complain. You've got to step forward, maybe deal with police. You've got quite a burden on you as a survivor to make the act work for you. And what I would like to see is more accountability for the perpetrators of conversion practices exist outside the pathway that the act gives survivors. So I would like to see action on both fronts. And one thing that could be done is to strengthen the legislation that we have. My hope is that it's reviewed, as is common for all new legislation after a few years. It's good practice to review it select committee submissions, including the Commission's own one, contained great advice on how it could be strengthened. Things like including our intersex whānau, offering support from ACC, considering again why we have to go through the very high threshold of Attorney General permission to put forward criminal complaints is a range of things. The idea of effectively fewer protections for people over the age of 18, when we know that people over the age of 18 make up a huge portion of the people that suffer harm from conversion practices. We would also like to see much better support, funding, resources made available to organizations that are working to help survivors recover and move into well-being and authenticity in their own lives. It's woefully inadequate and really needs to be addressed. I think the third part of your question was about practice direction, and I think Langi's really covered that. I just would endorse so much the importance of survivors in reclaiming your autonomy. Make sure that is that you use that to protect yourself and to be well as at some point, if it's right for you, helping out in peer support or advocacy. I really appreciated you pointing that out, Langi, that importance of that balance.
Kia ora. Thanks, Matt. So, Julia, I have some of the tricky questions for you nearing the end here. If conversion practices are banned, why is more work still needed?
It takes more than legislative change to actually enact societal and change on the ground. So what is visible with the law may be leading, but there's still a lot of work. And even Langi, when you talk to the practice of puberty blockers and what that actually means, shows that's still harm occurring in our communities. So legislative change is really important and a powerful signal to what is acceptable within our societies, but it does not automatically follow that the practice of conversion practices has ended. We know it is still continuing, and so that is a role. Why this work is more important than ever. And then the other thing too that is tied in with that is recognizing that the legislation is a tool of that still comes through state authorities and not, for many survivors and whānau, that may not be the safe place to go to. So we need to, that's just one lever. And then in terms of all the recommendations that have come to multiple arms in our communities, that there's a long way to go to still shift the cultures that enable this practice to occur. That's not to say this is a significant moment in our time, in our history, and we should be proud of that. But what we can't be, and to Langi and Matt's point, the burden does not rest on survivors to advocate for the change. The burden should rest with actually all of us. We are all responsible for that. So that is one lever, but we cannot rest and say, there's a report here and the ledge has changed. We have mahi to do. Does that answer your question, Prudence?
Kia ora, Julia. Matt, we have a few minutes. So Matt, I have a question for you, and I wonder if you can talk a bit more to this. Is there an issue if, say, there isn't that many complaints around conversion practices? What are your thoughts on that?
I've got a couple of thoughts on that. We know that one of the things that happens in conversion practices is the victim is made to feel like they, at their core, are the problem and are wrong. And when they also are in an environment that limits access to information or access to media or all of the richness of our society, many people either don't know that they're experiencing conversion practices or don't know that there's a pathway available to them to get help and to make complaint. And so if there are low numbers coming through, it's something that we expect because of the very nature of conversion practices. And that points to the importance of us all continuing to raise awareness about it so that more people will come forward. I would also say, I pick up on Julia's point about legislation as a signal. None of us hope that we'll start racking up lots of criminal convictions. That's not the point. The point of putting legislation forward is to send a very strong signal. And in our ideal world, what would happen is people who are performing conversion practices would see that signal and stop what they're doing. So we're not hoping for thousands of convictions. That would not be a win in our mind. I think there's a couple of things that point to why it may be the case that to some people, the numbers look low. I would say that there's much more to it as well. If the number of formal complaints appears to some to be low, what that number doesn't track are all the people who are reaching out. We're getting information that helps them take action in their own lives to change the relationships that they're in, that are coercive or that are unhelpful to them. And it doesn't capture the number of people who are connected to peer support, the number of people who are able to go and be allies to the rainbow people in their whānau and elsewhere in their lives. The Commission has processed many other types of inquiries besides those that became formal complaints under the law, and so have organizations around the rainbow sector.
Kia ora, Matt. Just wondering if there's any additional comment that Langi or Julia would like to make, and then I have one more or two more questions for Julia.
I think the comment I'd just like to make is that the work that we do is also interconnected if we really want conversion practices to stop. So in the disability area, really needing support services for disabled people that are trans and rainbow inclusive, and where there's appropriate resources for people who it's something I've seen definitely with trans people who are accessing support and who are not treated in the appropriate ways because of the problems with the service of the organisation.
Kia ora, thank you. Julia, I have a question for you. Is there a view around the Crown's responsibility when it comes to ensuring that the services they contract or refer are abiding by this legislation?
Absolutely, this is a critical area. The Crown has the legal and moral responsibility to ensure that its services that it contracts, you cannot contract your way out of your obligations and responsibilities. So who the Crown contracts to, they need to be making sure that the responsibility that they hold extends to how their procurement processes, which is who they contract out to, where their human rights obligations should be clearly reflected in health. Should be clearly reflected in contracting frameworks. So supply expectations, service delivery standards, at the heart of it, it's that the Crown is responsible for putting in the, they don't get to extinguish their responsibility as to who they contract for this. They need to make sure that who they contract to provide services are aware of their obligations under the legislation, and they need to be actively monitoring compliance with that legislation. Ultimately, any organisation that receives public putia, Crown money, could be considered accountable under the legislation, and the Crown is responsible. Think about the Royal Commission of Abuse and Care, the recommendations that held Crown and faith-based institutions accountable, that one of the findings of that recognises the Crown's responsibility in either setting up systems and then putting it at arm's length, like that there's some distance between them being responsible for harm that comes. They are responsible here, and the strength of the law and their obligations holds to who they enter relationship in to give effect to parts of this legislation.
Kia ora. Thank you for that. I'm going to stay with you because I know that you've got some calls to action, and we'll go with you for that, and then I will close us out with a karakia.
Pause for action. I think what I've heard loudly, what's in the report, the heartbeat of that in the kōrero from Langi and Matt, thank you, is the responsibility that work still continues here. This continues, hopefully, in our lifetime it ends, the discrimination and abuse that is carried out through conversion practices and harm that goes into our rainbow whānau and communities, and at the heart of that is our whānau. So whilst sometimes this can feel like, what do we do? We got things to do. This report isn't what I refer to as a yellow pages where it's written and it's neglected and left. It is online whānau here, and it is important to socialise and give life to it. It is important and also survivors in your whānau or people to know that there are things here where things are happening, but that there are recommendations in here as well that we need to be giving life to. So be sharing that as far as where you are comfortable, where we're in positions in our workplaces, in our communities and whānau. Some people may not feel confident talking to their church leaders or to their community leaders or their own whānau. But the more we socialise this, the more that we send the message about how this practice isn't okay and that there are tools to change it. Part of that as well, and as I said earlier in the recommendations, which are targeted at particular group, for those who are working in mental health, and many of our rainbow whānau have increased impacts of mental health experiences. There's a guide here online as well. So online in our team, I know we'll have emailed out a link and to all the links, and there's also one for people and whānau working in religious communities, and for those that work with our rangatahi and tamariki. So it's important that we continue to give life to the report, because it's not just the report, it's about harms that it captures, the voices of survivors' experiences that we know are still occurring today, but that we have the tools to make a difference. And if I may just end, to all of our rainbow whānau in New Zealand, and actually in the world. I framed things in languages that I understand in Tau Māori, but if I may, just in terms of at the heart of this is the sense of belonging, that we all have the right to belong, our babies have the right to belong, those whānau that have passed on, but those that are to come after us. On my face is my moko kauai, and I think of it, the word moko puna, which I said I identify as takatapui because that's a political act, but fundamentally we are all moko puna. Moko is the reflection or imprint of the puna, which can be seen as your springs, but translates to your ancestors. I am the imprint of my ancestors, and for those of you who have met my daughter Aotearoa Taupari, my youngest daughter, you'll see that she is the imprint of me. So and for me, that's how I carry my moko on my face as well, is that strength and sense of belonging. And if I can impart our right as whānau, as mokopuna that we all are, our right to just be, I just want to leave that with us all today, because that may not be the experience that you have now or will continue to do, or many of the whānau in this report, but we have the right to be mokopuna. And so mihi atu ki a koutou. Thank you. I'll finish there, Prudence. Thank you.
Kia ora, Julia. I can confirm that Rua Taupari is an imprint of you, and just reaffirming that we all have a right to be. So thank you everybody for joining us today. Please, as Julia said, share the report as far and wide as you are able to, and we hope to engage with you more in the future around this and other work. So I shall close us with karakia. Kia tau te rangi Māori e. Kia runga I ngā iwi o te ao. Let your peace reign on all the people of the world. Kia ora.